So to start with a bit about myself, I've been in industry for almost about 6 years. I've, I've been a mobile developer throughout, and one fun fact is I started my Android development when Android Studio was not there, which was in JetBrains. Bit to brag about myself, I invest myself into learning new technology, especially quantum computing and blockchain. As you can also see, a lot of stickers. But if you ask me what's my goal in life, I would say being meditative. And what I mean by this is not to sit in a cross-leg position and just meditate. It's to be in present, which I'm very bad at. So I'm trying to get better at it. And yeah, thanks to you guys, and welcome to this talk. It's from widgets to intelligence, building the future of UI with GenUI and Flutter. As you can already see, I've not used my intelligence to write this title, but it makes a lot of sense. I'll tell you why. To begin with, let's first understand what is happening in our current system. When I say our current software, how it is built. In our current system, everything is hard-coded or static, which means all the buttons, all the text fields, all the prompts, all the messages, everything is hard-coded. Now, what this leads to is when you have multiple customers and when you have to support those customers, and each customers have their own behavioral pattern. And when you take this behavioral pattern, it converts into list of features that you want to implement. And if you start implementing that, you can't build one product that fits to everyone. So that's the problem with current system. And it also leads to something where user has to learn how to use the app. A lot of my family members, they come to me and they say, how do I use this app? How do I use this feature? And stuff like that. And when we are building system, we keep in mind that we're building it for normal users or average users. And here, when we define average user, we define it in such a way that the average user is always rational, always calm, always makes the right decision. But that's not the case. In fact, when I was just getting into GenUI, I found this beautiful article which says, GenUI, why the future of software is empathetic. In fact, this article talks about something called we build static software for dynamic human beings. So that was very fascinating, and it tells why we need to be empathetic. In fact, let's understand with a small example. Imagine your goal is to withdraw cash from an ATM machine. So it's a busy day, and there's a long queue. You come to the queue, you wait, and then finally your turn comes. You insert your card, but then that's when you remember that you don't know your PIN. So you open your phone. Thanks to biometrics, you can easily log into your bank application. Then you start seeing where's the card option. So you would first see balance. You would see probably account statements, recent transactions, send money, receive money, but you don't find a card option. And then probably you think that let me click on account details. Probably that's where I find it. And then you go to account details, you might not find it there also. And then slowly you start to panic. You start to panic that there are people standing behind me, what to do, and stuff like that. So instead of focusing on getting the card details, you think about all these. And finally, when you find it, so when you go to card options, and then there might be another option of more option, which you click, and then you get a button. And when you click on it, you finally get the PIN. And then you go to the ATM and try to enter it, then it's timeout. So, and then if this user is someone who is very much embarrassed of all these situations, he would not even withdraw, he would just leave. He doesn't want to take extra time. So this is how when we say normal user, this is the scenario, right? Here I'm being very dramatic, but the chances of this is there. So that's where we need a system that understands user and not the other way around. So it's about user understanding. I mean, it's about the app understanding the user and not the other way around. So that's where generative UI comes into picture, or also called as GenUI. I don't know how many of you guys have heard of GenUI? No one? Oh, okay. Few bit. Okay, nice. So by definition, what is GenUI? GenUI is a user interface that is dynamically generated or adapted in real time by AI based on user context, behavior, or intent. So we would have already heard about generative AI, right? So what it does is it takes a natural language as an input and gives back a natural language as the output. So what if you can use that to build UI dynamically, so that if a user asks for something, you just get the UI right in the chatbot itself. So that is what is generative UI. But before we get into generative UI, it's important to understand the difference between generative UI and UI code generation. Okay, so generative UI means that AI generates and adapts UI, but in case of UI code generation, you give a screenshot or you give a prompt, and that will give a code in a specific language. The output of a generative UI is UI, but the output of a UI code generation is a code. And the generative UI is runtime, meaning your app is already up and running, and then the UI is generated at runtime. But in terms of UI code generation, you write the prompt, get the code, compile it, and then push into the app, and you run the app. Okay, that's the difference between GenUI and UI code generation. So get that difference. And then talking about dynamic UI, it is not at all a new concept. In fact, we have been doing dynamic UI long before AI came into picture, which is through something called as schema-driven UI. Okay, so what happens with schema-driven UI is you have a backend, you have a front end. They both come together to form a schema. Okay, so now if a backend sends a particular schema, render this UI. If it sends something else, render a different UI. In fact, GenUI is similar to schema-driven UI. It's just that the backend is replaced with artificial intelligence, which understands the user context. Based on the user context, it takes all the natural language, converts into understandable schema, and gives it to the UI, and UI is generated through that. But why Flutter? In fact, I can take an entire session for explaining the advantages of Flutter, but for those who doesn't know what is a Flutter, Flutter is a UI framework that is used to build hybrid applications. When I say hybrid application, you write the code base once, but you can deploy it in Android, iOS, web, desktop, everywhere. In fact, even you can build embedded softwares using Flutter. With that, it also gives you performance, it also gives you speed, and one other feature it gives is declarative in nature. What I mean by declarative in nature is UI is a function of state. In very simple terms, what this means is that you define what UI to be displayed for a given state, and the framework will figure out how to render it. So in a non-declarative framework, what happens is that you have to check the state, you have to check the UI, get the UI, update it manually, and render it. But in Flutter, everything is declarative. And this declarative goes very well with AI because AI acts as a state machine here. It generates the state, gives to the framework, and framework just renders it. That's the reason why Flutter is good for GenUI. To start with the concept of GenUI, we need to understand a concept called function call. It's a part of GenUI, but it's very simple concept. It's a concept where you give AI the ability to call a function. So you define a function, you define the parameters, and you say AI to call this function based on user request. So it understands the user request, it knows what function to call with what parameters. Let's explain this with a demo. Hopefully it should work. So I'll first explain what this whole setup is. You have a container, which is nothing but a box. You have set of states. It says width has 120, height has 120, and then border radius and stuff like that. Let me just take this prompt. Here it says set the width to 50, height to 100, color to bluish red, and border radius as 18. Now when I run this command, what happens is that AI understands the prompt, and it didn't work. I don't know why it didn't work, but let me play the same thing here. And it changes the entire shape. Now, how is this happening? It is through the concept of function calling. It takes the prompt that you have given. It understands that you have to call this update state of the container. And it knows that you are saying that the width is 50, height is 100. It takes those parameters, calculates it, and puts it into the function call. If I want to give it another try, let's see. Hopefully, I'll close the app and open it again. Sorry, this. So let's try to make it a circle of say radius 60. So here I'm not saying set the height to this, width to this, nothing. I'm just saying make it a circle and of radius 60. That's all I want. Finger crossed, it should work. It worked. So now, now if you look at it, I only set the parameter radius of 60. It calculated its height, it calculates its width, and everything other property it remains the same. So this is function calling. This gives a powerful tool for AI to call a functions that you have defined. Say for example, you have defined some functions like say a function called add to cart, and user comes and says that add iPhone 16 Pro Max to cart. So it could be a chat, it could be a voice in thing. It just calls the function, and the function adds the item into the cart. That's the power of function calling. Now, if I go through the code base, it's very simple. So all you're doing is getting the instance of a LLM. So in Flutter, it's very simple. You have packages. So here I'm using Firebase. So when I refer to Firebase, it means that it is going through a Gemini model. So I create the instance of a Gemini model. I define which model I want. And the important part is this. This is where I define the function definition. So I say what is the function name. I describe what the function does, and I give the parameters. I say it takes a width, which is of type number. It takes a height, which is of number, and then border radius, color, duration, and curve. Okay. So I define these as the tool to AI and says that, okay, this is a function that you can call. Now, what happens is when a user prompts something, it takes all those data, converts into schema, which is understandable by the function, and then it gives a function callback. And in handle function, all you have to do is check what the function that is coming from AI. And if it is an update container, get all the parameters that the AI is giving you, and then update the state. So this way you can have a control of function also. Like it's not AI calling the function, it gives you a control back to a developer. So you can restrict anything that you want, and it is safe. So this is all about function call, but one important thing is that it has something called as error correction. So let me show you a diagram there. Probably it's this one, yeah. So this is what Google suggests. So when you are calling a function, when you define a function, the LLM decides whether to end the function call or call a function call. If it calls a function call, you have to return back a result. If you pass back the result, the AI model gets to know that the function call is successful, or else it will try to recalculate the parameters again and call the function. This also leads to another concept called nested function call. Say for example, a particular function 1 is called, and if it is successful, I want to call a function 2. So that can be done through AI automatically, but you have to follow this pattern. So it's like when a Gemini model calls a function, execute the function. If that function is successful, send back the result to Gemini model so it understands that it is successful, and it calls the next function call, or else it stops the execution there itself. So this is about function call. so we went through the code base also. The next one is GenUI in action. So we have not yet gotten into GenUI in action. Let's try to do a demo and then get into explaining stuff. So here I have a simple app which generates survey. Okay, so I give a prompt. Let's go with a prompt saying generate a survey for Manu's presentation on GenUI at Leeds mobile. So all I'm giving is a prompt, and I click on generate survey. Again, finger crossed. Hopefully it should work. And yeah, it generated a survey form for me. And all these datas are dynamic. All these datas are generated by AI. None of this is written by me. But what I do is I define how the rating should be present, whether it should be a numerical rating or it should have star rating or any icon that you want to. So you define the widget or the component, how it should look like. And like in this case, how a radio button should look like, how a checkbox should look like, how a text field should look like. I define those components and I give it to the AI model. AI model understands what the user is asking, then pre-builds the schema and gives it back to the UI, and UI, it just renders it. Okay, and then you have full control over whatever UI that comes. So you can have a state maintained for these, and then you can record the feedback itself. So this is what is GenUI. GenUI is about generating dynamic user interfaces. So if I have to show you how it works under the hood, this is high level. Under the hood, it might get much more complex. So as I previously mentioned, you have to feed the AI model with something called as widget catalog, followed by system prompt. Here, system prompt represents what the GenUI feature is doing. Okay, and then you have user prompt, which is creating the feedback itself. All these are connected through something called as content generator. Okay, and then content generator uses a protocol called A2UI protocol by Google, which is AI to UI protocol, and generates something called as A2UI messages. This is nothing but a JSON messages that are then feeded into something called as A2UI processor. And this A2UI processor takes those A2UI messages and generates a user UI definition. And all these are connected through something called as GenUI conversation. It takes the A2UI processor, it takes the content generator, and then gives a callback with something called as surface ID. And that surface ID is given to GenUI surface, which will render the UI. Okay, so again to reiterate, so it starts with user prompt. When you give a user prompt, it goes through GenUI. GenUI calls the content generator, checks what the system prompt or what you are supposed to do, and based on that, it understands that, okay, this is what the user is trying to achieve. It checks whether do you have all these components. It gathers the components and gives everything in the form of a JSON, which is given to a A2UI processor that creates a UI definition. And this is possible because of a declarative nature of Flutter. And once this is done, GenUI also stores these UI definition with a surface ID, and that surface ID is given to GenUI surface. GenUI surface asks GenUI, give me all the UI definitions based on the surface ID, and it gives the UI definition objects, and then the UI is rendered. Okay? So this is high level, but if you go in depth, it is much more complex. But good thing about this GenUI package is that you don't have to worry about all those. So if I go to the code base, so as I previously mentioned, you need a content generator, which takes a set of catalogs, which is nothing but a widget catalogs. So if I go inside, I have defined what are the widget catalogs, like survey section, text blocks, spacer, divider, rating, yes or no, and stuff like that. So if I go inside the definition of these, so you can see that it has something called as name, and it has a schema. And if you go to schema, it has what should be the label, what should be the value, what should be the min, what is the max. So you define the schema and you also define the UI itself. So this is how you define the UI for it. So when you give this and the schema to AI, so it understands that, okay, what you are trying to achieve. And here in the content generator, I'm giving a catalog, I'm also giving system prompt. And if I go inside system prompt, here you can see that I'm defining what the system prompt is, meaning you are a survey generator and handle two requests. Right now, let's only focus on generate survey. So here I'm defining what you have to do. You have to generate a survey and how it has to be structured and what are the possible widgets that you have and stuff like that. And here you have GenUI conversation, which takes a to a UI processor, and all it does is it gives you callbacks. And in the code, if I go to GenUI surface, it takes a surface ID. So if you see, all the complex part is taken care by the package. All you have to do is create a content generator, create a GenUI conversation, and just add a GenUI surface. And your entire generative UI is in your app. So it's that simple in terms of code, but if you go in depth of how it is actually implemented, it is a bit complex. And one warning here is that if you're using GenUI package, this is very new and things are about to change in it. So keep that in mind. And yeah, let's go back to our first user who was facing an issue and see how GenUI can solve this issue. So let's try again a demo, see if. Okay. Code. Okay, got it. Okay. So yeah, so imagine this is a bank app, and here I don't want to wander around where is the card option and stuff like that. I just go directly and say I want to check my card pin. And it understands the user and it gives you the card reveal pin right where the user wants. You click on it, you get it. Now, say for example, I say something more like I want, or I'll say that my card pin is being revealed. What should I do?
So with Gen UI, is the LLM, like presumably you have to have like an LLM running for
Yeah.
it to work, right?
Yeah.
Would that be like connected through the internet or like would it be on your phone?
So again, you can have both the option, but in this case, I've used Firebase, so it has connected to Gemini model.
Right.
But if you want, you can have Gemma model, which is again through the local one, which you can put it in on device and increase the performance. Yeah, you can have both the way. Yeah.
So on that, in terms of processing and generating, what's the cost of CPU and power?
Well, if you are doing a local model, then I've not experienced on that. I don't know how CPU consumption happens. But if you're doing remote, it's just an API call. So nothing there you have to.
Can I ask for?
Yes, yes, yes.
So you said earlier on that the widgets are like predefined catalogs and that. So because then that becomes like a static, catalog that
That's
AI is limited to.
That's true, that's true. But the problem with letting AI generate is that how do you define your system prompt? It becomes complex. So say for example, if I have to generate the survey itself, I would have to define how exactly those components has to be rendered, whether it should be numerical or for a radio button or a single selection, it should be a radio button. So you have to define everything in a system prompt. And in fact, I'll be talking in the next slide the limitations of GenUI, where I'll be also touching on those things that you asked. Yeah, probably the next slide might answer your question. Yes, go ahead.
From what you said, if you call an API in some class somewhere with no prompt hijacking
yeah, again, I'll be talking about all those limitations in the next slide. No worries. Yeah, so where was I? Yeah, I was probably explaining our use case. I think it might not work. Probably I've exhausted my limit. Let me again try once again. Give me recent transactions that I have made. Probably this should work. No? Yeah. Okay. Worked. Yeah. So this is what GenUI. GenUI is all about user. So app understanding the user and not the other way around. So you don't end up. So it's about making the system more empathetic to the user. Okay. That's the whole goal of GenUI. Now, as we were talking about things, we'll come to limitations. The first thing is decision paralysis, the topic that I was discussing about. If you start giving everything in a system prompt, what happens is that GenUI or AI model, it goes into decision paralysis, or also called as hallucination. Yeah. It becomes difficult to make decisions. So in order to have a GenUI functionality, you have to make sure that you limit your feature. Okay. So you can have n number of GenUI feature in your app, but don't put everything at once. But one way of solving this is that you can introduce a middle layer. Say, for example, it takes a prompt, it decides which system prompt to even pick. So you can introduce that middle layer, but again, that gets complicated when you are actually engineering it. So that is one thing that you have to keep in mind, which is decision paralysis. The second thing is testing becomes harder. When I say testing becomes harder, you can write unit testing, you can test your widgets, you can in fact mock the content generator, which is the AI model itself. You can mock all these and give the AI the A2UI messages, you can mock them. So you can test, have unit testing and stuff like that, but you can never write an E2E testing with GenUI. So because in E2E testing, you need a deterministic system. You need to know what the output is. This is probabilistic. So you can never predict what AI would give. That also leads to another problem called debugging. Yes?
Yeah, so I agree with deterministic, but we at least can try to test limits that we set, right? So for the survey
Yeah.
you've shown before, right?
Yeah, that's what I was telling. You can do unit testing. You can mock the behavior of LLM and see whether the UI is properly reflecting or not. But you can't test the output from the AI. That would be a whole different thing, right?
Basically, you can try and run it and see if the output in several tries fit your limitations.
Yeah, so you can do manual testing. That is possible. In fact, Google suggests to use something called as Google AI Studio. So you can give the system prompt. You can try all possible prompts that you can give to it and see whether it is generating the right schema or not. So through that you can do manual testing, but you can't do automation testing with GenUI. Is what I was trying to say. And one other thing with debugging is that you can never reproduce the issue that came for a user. So it becomes very difficult. The other thing, the one that I was talking about, security. Yes, security also is something that you have to keep in mind, especially when you are playing with AI models. Prompt injection is something that you have to be worried about. And also whether, like, in fact, there was one example that I came across when I was learning about AI, is that, say, for example, you create an AI system, you give all the power that it can have, and ask it to, say, solve global warming. The first thing it would do is kill all human beings. So that's how it solves. So you need to understand what the AI can do, right? So, and when you're giving the tools also, say, like, for example, function calling is a powerful tool. Now, say, for example, you give making of transaction through function call. that is like a security issue, right? You need to make sure that you have the control over it. Though you have to treat AI to only understand a natural language, but end of the day, you have to put all the constraint, all the restrictions and stuff like that. Another one, which is performance and latency. So one way to solve it is through using on-device models. But the problem with on-device model is to update them. Okay? So that's the problem with on-device model. And it also increases your app size. You can reduce it by dynamically downloading it, but still your app size will increase. The next one is maintainability. So not just, so if you're using an on-device model, not just the model maintenance, but also say, for example, a feature changes. Now you have to update the catalog, you have to update the system prompt, and you have to make sure that those are maintained. So those are the limitation, but despite all this limitation, GenUI will be part of the future UI. It's not going to be completely GenUI. It cannot. For places where you have you need performance, for animations and stuff like that, you can't introduce GenUI there. GenUI has to be used in places only where there is frequent change, where you need dynamic contents. That's when you have to use GenUI, and you have to combine both static UI and dynamic UI, and that's when you get a proper user interface. Yeah.
Yeah. In your experience, can you give me an example where you faced hallucinations? The reason why I'm asking this is, in one of the previous examples you showed, right? So you're already defining this of you facing hallucinations.
So in terms of GenUI, I would first give you in terms of, say, for example, if you have used Visual Studio, you would have a Copilot chatbot, right? So there is this small icon called context. It defines how much token has been used. Now, as in when you finish that token, what happens is that the output that you ask, I mean, the prompt that you ask, will not give you a right output. So rather, you open a new window which does not have a context at all, it will give you a much better output. The reason, because when you give so much data to AI model, it gets confused what to pick, whether the one that it knows or the one that you have given. So that's what I was talking about hallucination. So in this case, if I don't restrict the widgets, if I don't restrict all those, and if I say, use your brain, I mean, if it has brain, so use your brain, define like a modernized UI and stuff like that, it doesn't know what the output I have to give, right? So it's like what you ask is what you get. And in AI, it becomes very much clear that if you ask a right input, like you feed a right input, it gives you a right output. If you just ask randomly, that's when it gets confused to make decisions. And that is what I was trying to say about GenUI.
If I have to, sorry, so if I have to add, let's say I want to add a field, so I do not need to change the prompt. I need to go back to the schema and add a field there.
Yes.
And then use the same prompt to see the new schema getting generated.
So when you say field, if you are adding like a new component, like
Let's say a new component.
yeah. So if you have to add a new component, then you have to define the catalog and say that this catalog is present, and as and when if the user asks for something, use that if it is needed and then generate it. So yeah, that's where maintainability comes into picture. When you are adding something new, you need to make sure that the catalog is updated, your schema is updated. That's when you get the right output. Yeah. Yes.
Couple of questions. First, are you sending up the whole catalog in the context every time?
No.
You just send the schema?
Yeah, so the thing is, I send the schema and I send the keyword for the field. Yeah.
Right, okay. And then this also, I mean, it sounds great. Lots of, I can see the potential, but it seems to really lend well to more read-only information. If you was trying to, like your survey form, for example, you'd have to write quite a clever response that then then programmatically loops through all the components to get the fields to then submit it to somewhere or handle that data. It's going to be quite hard to do something that's two-way.
Not necessary, because when you define those components, you also define state handlers for it. So when say for example, GenUI generates the feedback form, there is a state handler to those. So as in when you type something, the state handler is updated with the value.
State,
Yeah.
then it's continued
And then you have the control over what field has been inputted. Now you can give that input back to the GenUI and generate a response if you want, like you are doing an emotional survey of whether it is a good feedback or not. You can pass back the states that you have captured back to the GenUI, and then you can get back the response. So so end of the day, it only creates the UI and gives back the control to developers.
So you still got all
Yes.
your handlers and your state
Yeah,
management and
yeah,
everything
yeah,
around.
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So you have full control over your UI, your state handlers, everything.
Yeah.
AI is only converting user prompts into schema, which fit well with generative UI. And that's the end of the talk. Thank you, guys. Any more questions? Yes, yes.
Yeah, I just had one. I just wanted to understand if you give the same, if you ask the same question to your prompts, maybe if you want to check it now, or if you have already tried the same question again and again, does it generate the same output?
So you are restricting your system prompt, right?
Yeah, true. Like all those constraints, with all those constraints being there, still does it generate the same output?
Yes, yes, yes. So mostly you have to restrict your system prompt in such a way that you have to use these components. And if you use these components, when it understands natural language, it will always give you the right schema that it needs. But if you start giving more context to it and ask different way of achieving the same thing, that's when it makes get confused to me.
Maybe if I'm asking, if my intention is something like, if there are 3 users and 3 users have the same intention, but they are not phrasing the question in the same manner,
Yeah.
then does it generate something new every time?
That completely depends on which AI model that you're using. So if it is a very well model with billions of data, then it does give. Yes. It completely depends on that. And yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering, like, from a use case point of view, like in the banking app, you were trying to find card details and the transactions as well.
Yeah.
It seems as though, like, you can use it to find things in the app.
Yes.
But, like, you can just have a search bar in the app to find features.
Well, again, in the search bar, you have to input the exact search keyword. You can't just input a natural language. So that's where AI comes into picture. So it has to understand what user is trying to say and convert that into search keywords where you can search. So it can be done with the search bar, but again, you have to write all these search keyword. In fact, if you look at AI, it's nothing but set of if-else statements, right? So end of the day, that's what will happen.
Do you think, what about if, like, the AI could look at how the user uses an app day to day and pushes or generates UI, every time they come back to the app, it looks a bit different depending on what they use the most. Would that be?
Yeah, you can do it. In fact, for this demo, I wanted to come up with a use case where, like, for example, if you take your phone to an ATM machine, it understands the geographic location and it says that you're near the ATM. Can you rephrase the entire UI to fit in such a way that card details are shown at the top? You can do it. That's where, like, that's what is generative UI. But again, you need to decide whether do you want to implement that feature or not. Yes. Yeah. I mean, again, if you define those catalogs here in this banking application, I've given actually 20 to 25 catalogs. But what I've not defined is schemas. So I've only defined the keywords. So since it's a banking application, security comes a major point there. So I don't want anything to be injected by the AI. I just want, it is a search functionality. So I just want user ask for something, let him have a user interface appear for what he's asking for. So it narrows down the options into one options. So that's why I have used it. But yeah, you can, it depends on the use case. Yeah.
Where the data comes from, because if you say, like, for example, the banking
oh, give me my 10 most recent transactions, where does it get in like the 10 most recent transactions?
Yes. The point here is, again, AI will call the function. It says that someone is trying to get the transaction with this amount of transaction. It gives you the amount and it gives you what is the goal. You write the logic of calling the API, your backend API call, and getting the data and then injecting it to the UI. So end of the day, you as the developer has to do most of the thing. It's just AI, again, to reiterate, it just understands natural language, gives you the goal that you're trying to achieve. And
It gives you the component which already has all the bindings for the security from the mobile.
yeah.
So then it would be inside my components
Yeah.
that I will make all the API.
Yes,
calls.
yes.
So it present you the transaction list. The transaction list has already got all the hooks and the bindings for the API with the
Yeah.
security provision in place.
Exactly. Yes.
I'm wondering if you have any examples of like concrete implementations of this that are already deployed,
Yes.
or is this like very much?
No, in fact, if you go to ChatGPT and search for give me top 10 restaurants in Manchester, you don't get the address, you get the Google map itself there. That is what is GenUI. So, so we have been using GenUI without our awareness. In fact, you can do shopping. In fact, Shopify is trying to integrate with ChatGPT. So bring all the Shopify features into ChatGPT itself. So you don't have to leave ChatGPT at all. In fact, one of the use case was Pets Home app, I guess. They are integrated with Shopify and they are trying to integrate with ChatGPT. So you can buy food for your pet right in the chatbot itself. So again, AI is not doing everything. It's just that you put those components into chat functionalities and you take the action within the chat itself. Yeah. Yes.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, so I guess in banking, there's like certain UI elements we need to show for regulatory reasons. Like it must show
This
something.
like message.
Yeah, must show this message for compliance reasons.
You can do it. So when you click on send button, you see what the receiver is, what the amount you're trying to send, and probably generate an UI, and you can still show whatever prompt you want to show. Is that what you were looking for? I don't.
Makes sense, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was going to say, given how we're pushing automation and everything, are we with GenUI, are we going to get to a place so far, or I think you've already.
I think it's.
It will depend on the developer or the company.
Got it. At least at this point, I don't see any application which gives all the sensitive things to be taken care by AI. But what you can do is you can reduce the click actions that you take to make a transaction. You can reduce it to one single click action, which is you can use function call, nested function call. Like if this particular, say for example, you enter a receiver number. If that receiver number is valid, then you try to go to the next functionality. So all these can be automated through nested function calls. And then you can reduce the click action that it takes to go to that point. But if you ask me personally, I would not, at least at this point, no. It's like giving AI all the tool and asking to solve global warming. So that's what has gonna happen. So, yes.
That what is output is accurate. Do you think that's a possible way that could get around the whole testing issue, or is that just?
So the thing is, when I say hard to test, it is about automation, but you can still do manual testing. So if you are doing manual testing, you have these AI studios so that you don't exhaust your tokens. You can test out all possible things in that AI studio and see if your system prompt is well defined and well restricted to give the necessary output. You can't do automation because you can never expect AI to generate the same output for a given prompt. So that is where I say hard to test. But in terms of industry, one concern that I highly asked is the consistency. So if two users are asking somewhat similar prompt, can we generate, say for example, survey builder? Can two user give the same prompt, can have the same survey or not? That is what they want. Whether can you create a static user response. That is, to an extent, it is possible. You can add a caching layer, make sure that whatever prompt is coming, whether it matches to that and give it or not. But again, if you're doing that, why not hard code it directly and then get it, right?
You
So
can test using a JSON schema, the output came
yes.
and matched your schema, right?
Yeah.
So therefore, you wouldn't be testing the individual aspects of what it generates, but you know it fits and it's not hallucinating random code and random JSON structures and
Yes.
things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
So you could do the API testing then?
Yes, you can do an API test. Yeah. 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 That's a right way to say it. Yeah. Good.
Yeah, testing prompts adds another layer to all our testing cycles. All right, we've now had a prompt testing engineer into our.
Yes.
Yeah, I was curious. You said about debugging the fact that every case has a different message. Maybe find an issue in the prompt or something.
Got it. That's actually a good question. In fact, you can log everything. So you can log the input, you can log the output, the schema, everything is in your control. So you can log those. So you can have logs and print things. But if, say, for example, in production, user says that I've given this prompt, but I've ended up getting an UI that is not expected, then you can't go to your QA and ask him to reproduce this issue. That's where debugging becomes difficult. But if there is a way to capture all those logs in production code, yeah, you can do it. You can literally put logs for every single thing. Yeah, perfect. Any other questions? Thank you.